We are Croatian, Slavic, one of few Slavic countries, and we speak Slavic language that we call Croatian. I will try to teach you a word or two during our walking tour of our language. Of course, most of us really do use other foreign languages, especially during summer season or tourist season here on Croatian coastline. Become a independent Republic of Croatia just 30 years ago. Yeah. But we do really have a very long history here on this part of the Mediterranean. We have been inhabited in the time of antiquity by Illyrian tribes. Greeks would settle here, Romans too, and then Slavs came in 7th century, and together with Romans they founded specifically here the old town Dubrovnik. So our history goes way back, and I will just do my best to inside of the city, exploring the main streets. I will take you within the charming streets, mostly in the flat area of the city. I don't want to scare you, but in total, the city has 5,423 steps. With plenty of... Yes, I am.
So flat.
Okay, ready to go in? Did you take the photos? Yeah. So we've just stepped on the main street by entering both the main gates and inner pillar gates. So there is, if you turn around, you notice there is a hole in the wall where the inner gates are, and it is the area on the right also where the main entrance to walk the wall is located. So our city, old city of Dubrovnik, is perfectly protected by medieval walls that date back to 13th century. It was, of course, 400 years long construction, during which the walls were always kept up to date, and they were reinforced, the fire towers were added, our ancestors would do anything to protect the city the best way they could. In general, the city is a mixture of different styles, and the main reason why that is the case is because of the earthquakes. So all the problems that our city have had in the history, those problems were caused by natural disasters, earthquakes and aqueducts. So our city during the medieval times was a city of great achievements. The city throughout the 15th century was supplied by fresh water. It had a sewage system that is still in function. You don't want to know the details. It had a very well organized community as well. What do you think, how many people live within the wall? Outside, there's around 41,000 people that live outside of the city. What do you think, how many people live here? I know you haven't seen much of the city so far, but 1,000 people live within the wall. And wherever you see sheets, towels, clothes hanging from the windows of the balconies, or windows of balconies, you know that locals live in those properties. Since the morning is slightly windy, they will be closed outside. Trust me, because they dry quicker. Yeah. We don't have dryers. Yeah, we don't need them. Yeah. All right. If you would want to do something fun later on, maybe take a look onto that stone. You can jump on it. Especially you, man. If you want to prove that you are a real man, you'll have to stand on it, undress without touching the wall. 100%?
Is that why it's all around there?
Exactly, because of the old failed attempts on daily basis happening for years and years now. Yes, because his head became very slippery. If you take a look, you'll notice, the main street, it gets polished because of the thousands and thousands of people walking on the limestone. The entire city was built by local limestone. Would you like to do it now? With all of the audience outside? No.
I have camera right here.
There's narrow street that has views onto the highest point of the northern wall. Yep. You know what happened? In my opinion, I was asked that question earlier. It's much better to take TUK-TUK, yeah, than the cable car because the cable car drive is just 4 minutes. TUK-TUK will take you with the main road, will take you with a little bit adventurous road uphill to get to the top. You have better views. Where's the end? The top. Top. You notice the northern gate. Yeah. So for centuries, from 13th century until the 19th century, we had just two entrances, western and an eastern one. But then when the Austrians took over, they made a lot of modifications of the walls and the old port that we'll access very soon. We are very grateful actually for them. The fact that they made the northern entrance made our access to the city much easier. There is a parking outside, it's also a direct access to the cable car station, and when it's crowded in Dubrovnik, it's good to know that there are other options, other exits to take. But that's also the entrance that we avoid exit actually, because there's a lot of steps to get to there, and it's much easier to reach the western or eastern entrance. So that's a newer edition, 19th century edition, mostly because by that time the walls lost their purpose. Yeah, here, the purpose why they were built. Long, and until the 11th century, where the main street is now, there was a channel, water channel. So for example, what Venice did is that they left water to run throughout the city, and we filled in water and created streets. That's why we have an internal joke of Venice sinking because of their not wise decisions. We are not, of course, it's just a joke. We love Venice, it's our sister city. But Venice was the biggest rival of our city throughout the history. Both Venice and Dubrovnik were two most important trading cities, city ports. They were always competing against each other. Venice always wanted to take over Dubrovnik, since our city here was built on a very important location, great location actually, for the trading business, and it was in a way destined from 7th century onwards to become a trading force on this part of the Mediterranean. So you would have merchants from all over Europe coming here, and also from the east, since we have always been located between the east and west world, and we always needed to balance. And I have to tell you, our ancestors were great diplomats. Their ability to negotiate, to find their way out from any issues that they had or might have in the future was just amazing, and it amazes us these days. So the walls itself were built to just send a message that Dubrovnik is a city that is very hard to penetrate, to take over, and no one ever came in by using force. During the medieval times and existence of the Dubrovnik Republic, and the Republic existed for over 500 years, from the mid-14th century until Napoleon's arrival. Of course, he was here, as everywhere else. Our flag used to sit on the terrace on top of Orlando's column, and it of course had a painting of our patron saint, Saint Blaise, and inscription Libertas, because liberty was the most important thing here in Dubrovnik. It's what locals cherished the most, and they would do anything just to remain independent and to not have anyone interfering in the business of the city. He's a very special to us here in Dubrovnik. We elected him 11 centuries ago to protect our city. And 11th century is a very long time to protect a very touristy city, especially after the filming of Game of Thrones and all the craziness that started. So we just said, it's okay, St. Blaise will put up the actual webcams. So yeah, he's enjoying the best views onto the city. He was known as a healer of sore throat and diseases connected with the throat. So each year on 3rd of February for 11 centuries now, we have a procession. We celebrate our patron saint. The procession begins from where we started with our walking tour and finishes just here in front of his church. All right. Would you like to go to the old port? Because the old port is behind, so we can do the circle,
yes,
and then I'll get you. Yes. Okay. Back in the time, and it still is. In the way, we are standing in front of the former shipyard in Dubrovnik. Nowadays, in its interior space is where Arsenal restaurant is. And before the 19th century, we did not have this promenade because there was no need for anyone to take easy strolls in the old port because the boats were built inside and they had to go out. Yeah, so this was an open area. Yeah, the sea came all the way. Built by French troops. When they took over, abolished the Republic of Dubrovnik, they wanted to make sure that they have two fortresses on great locations for surveillance purposes. They never had to use nor Imperial Fortress nor the one just on the island outside of the old city of Dubrovnik. What we did, that was the first line of defense in the year 1991, and the first part of Dubrovnik that was bombarded. So everywhere, very good connections. This was a center of espionage. I mean, to research Dubrovnik's history is a really fun thing to do. Yeah.
I have to do that.
You know what else we are special for? If you take a look onto the exterior property, the stone one with the tiles, yeah, just above the sea,
right.
Yeah, down. That was a 17th century quarantine. I have to tell you, we didn't move far from those medieval times when the cities were threatened by plague and other biggest diseases. So we've had quarantines even before the 17th century, of course. One of the first cities that had quarantines on the smaller islands, yeah, where everyone traveling on the boats, yeah, had to stop, disembark, and be examined by doctors and spend 40 days inside. Yes. So in 17th century, all the travelers, being merchant sailors, had to disembark and spend time, those 40 days inside. Yeah. And also that gave an opportunity and plenty of time for locals to check what they have on their ships, double check everything. And we do know for the fact that there was a lot of business going on inside of the quarantine. It had several sections, people were coming in, going out, never coming out, and so on. Yeah. Strict medieval times. Now they find those beautiful large trees is a disco club today. It's why our ancestors built it, of course, for us to party inside. Next to the Eastern Gate is where Revelin, in the past, in the 15th century, very important fortress where all the cannons were smelted, where our government had their offices after the great 17th century earthquake when the Revelin fortress remained almost intact. But today there is an archaeological museum in the ground floor where the VIP entrance is for the evening partying. The first level and the upper open air terrace is where all the partying goes on. Yeah, and also during the Dubrovnik Summer Festival months, It's when not just the Rebellion Fortress, but the fortresses also out on the walls and the squares and the atriums become a venue for cultural events. So yeah, next time when you come to Dubrovnik, you know that you have a possibility to party in a 15th century old fortress. Beautifully made. Our goldsmiths were known as a very skilled one through Europe, of course. So they made this beautiful jewelry that I always like to wear just to point out our traditional jewelry that you can see in the local jewelry shops that we'll notice when we are in the city. I'll take you in front of the Rector Palace. This is its southern facility here in Dubrovnik. We knew that from the beginning, from 8th century onwards, they were protecting our city, and with their help, palace, 15th and 16th century, beautiful Renaissance and Gothic, the other one that resisted the great mid-17th century, the biggest earthquake in Dubrovnik. I mentioned the Dubrovnik Republic that existed for over 500 years. From the mid-14th century until Napoleon's arrival, the head of the city-state at that time was Rector, who was like a mayor nowadays, yeah. He lived on the first floor of the palace and he was elected by Senate for a mandate of only 30 days. So the rectors were just changing. Every 30 days, the old one would go out, the new one would come in. Why? Because they were very much afraid of one person or one family taking advantage of its power. Yeah, which was a very wise decision. So all the power was in the hands of Senate and councils. They were the ones that actually governed the city, but also those were 30 families. Self-proclaimed aristocracy. It's what Venetians did too. They would find roots, some Roman, yeah. So 30 families actually ruled the city. So we did have social classes, as Venice did, aristocracy, wealthy merchants, and then commoners that didn't have any say in the governing the city. Interestingly, in the ground floor of the Rector's Palace is where the prison was, a courthouse, center of the local administration. Everyone was allowed to go in, socialize in the open atrium, take some water from a fountain, visit their family or friends in prison. Yeah. Nowadays, this is a historical and cultural museum. On the first floor, just above the former meeting room, is where the inscription is, very important one, that the members of Senate and Rector were reminded on daily basis when attending a meeting that they should forget about their private affairs and focus on public good. Yeah, we should go a bit more about that. The Dubrovnik's theater, since we have always been a very cultural city, is just in between the government buildings, Rector Palace and the City Hall. It's a tiny theater, but big enough for the needs of the city of Dubrovnik. It's dedicated to Marin Držić. Yeah, Marin Držić was known, still is, as a Croatian Shakespeare. He was a very rebellious character from the history of Dubrovnik, and he was writing satires.
Oh, wow.
He lived in 16th century and he was writing funny stories about everyday life in Dubrovnik, using Dubrovnik dialect, names common just for Dubrovnik, and it's really fun to attend, for example, a theater play performed by Croatian theater during Dubrovnik Summer Festival in Rector Palace, for example, or on the main square, written by Marin Držić. He's also one of the statues in Dubrovnik that is being tortured on a daily basis. As assumably, yeah. Apparently, he has a lucky nose.
Oh, you
Apparently, yeah.
His nose was big enough already. Now, when it became yellow,
Oh my
it seems
goodness.
even bigger than it is. So Marin Držić was a priest as well. We'll move along with a shopping street. Promise me that you won't enter the shops.
You're not allowed to enter the shop.
Taste local sweets. That's what I'll. Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned local sweets. All right, taking advantage of an opportunity to get some sugar. So we have peeled oranges with sugar as a traditional sweet here in Dubrovnik region, almonds mixed with sugar, cinnamon, chocolate, and also dried figs, since we are Mediterranean.
Fig salami.
Yes.
What is that?
So
it
it's
like
a
a-
salami made of figs, but mixed with some like sweet herbs, and it's a really delicious
Really?
thing. And then there are liquors made of different herbs, walnuts, cherry, yeah, delicious. That we drink as a aperitif before a very big meal. So we are now in front of the 19th century, Orthodox Church in Dubrovnik, old town that has been nicely polished because Yugoslav People's Army, and they are Orthodox religion dominantly, in difference from us Croatians. They damaged their own church, so it needed to be, in a way, rebuilt. And this corner property here has a memory wall from the inside. It is a property owned by a local artist, Ivo Grbić. He was the one of few people that stayed in Dubrovnik during the aggression in the year 1991 and 1992. So you'll see the photos of his art gallery and this property being damaged. Yeah. During our walk. Photos just here of his gallery in 1990, and then after the aggression 1991 there is an actual map showing the damages onto the city, a little bit, a few sentences of his experience that he wrote, him celebrating with the pot on his head that he survived after the worst day of the attacks on 6th of December, St. Nicholas Day in the year 1991, and his property was one of the 6 properties that was completely destroyed from the inside. Just outside walls remained. So this is the side wall of the small chapel. Yeah, here in this quieter neighborhood nowadays, but back in the medieval times, this was the area where a lot of children lived. And they played around the church all the time, and the local priest was disturbed on a daily basis. He wanted to enjoy his afternoon siesta, but the children were playing with the ball and knocking the ball on the wall. He must have been very angry because he wrote here, he carved one sentence here in Latin, which says, "Peace to you who play with the ball, you'll find that you who play with the ball." Yeah, and we have an actual year 1597, and this inscription is considered to be the first graffiti in Dubrovnik, and also a first mention of football or soccer, as you would say, because we are a just great soccer nation.